Chapter 7, Part 2. One day, as they lay ashore waiting for Odd and Thorgort and Dag to bring a few sheep down from a hillside, Starkad said, "I feel at a loss without a sword, Bjorn. I can manage with the axe, but it is not my weapon. If we ever get down to Northumbria, I must look out for a new sword. Did I ever sing the old widow song for you?" Bjorn shook his head. Starkad often used to break off like that, and the only thing was to let him ramble on till he was done. Now he sang, "Makers of widows, wander we must, killers twixt seed time and salting of kine, walking the whale's way, sailing the swan's path, daring the sun's track, tricking dark death. In the jaws of the storm, jesting we stand, lashed with hail's fury, hands frozen to line. Numb head, rain shaken, sharp spume in the nostril, salt caking hair and blood's haven in sight." When he got to the end of the song, he gave such a hard thump on the gunwale beside him that Bjorn nearly jumped in the air. Starkad saw this and laughed. "Aye, that was the old rowing song," he said. "It kept the oars going in time, and the folk who heard it up on the shore got to know it. After they'd heard it, we never had much trouble sailing in and taking what we needed. But the old days are going fast, lad, and I'll wager you there are not more than 100 men in the world who could still sing you that song." Bjorn thought a while, then said, "Up in Iceland the old men say the same. They say the world is growing old and tired and is almost ready to end. They say that on the day all men take Christ as their Lord, the world will sink into the sea." Starkad nodded. "There may be something in that," he said, "for I have noticed that whenever a folk take the priests as their lawgivers, they all get to be so gentle that it's almost a shame to rob them. They are like women. Thank God we are only half Christians." Bjorn said, "It will be a fair while before the Icelanders get like that, Starkad. News reaches them slowly. Did you ever hear of my father's kinsman, Grettir? He swore an oath to keep the old ways living and went round the north burning houses and finding trolls to kill. I never saw him. He had gone to Norway before I was big enough to remember him, but my father often told me of the things he got up to. Some of them were terrible." Starkad was whittling a piece of wood with a knife and said, "Tell me some of them. I like to hear of a man with principles." Bjorn scratched his head, then said, "Well, he once killed an alderman with a milking stool and got outlawed." Starkad nodded and tossed the stick over the side. "That is well enough," he said, "but I wouldn't say it was the bravest thing I had heard of, though Grettir was your kinsman." The boy thought again and suddenly said, "Oh, there was a time when he really did something great. It was at Haramsey, at Thorfinn's steading. There was a dead old king there named Kar, who lay in a dark mound, a burial how, with all his brooches and weapons. So my kinsman went out one night, dug the mound open and let himself down with a rope." Starkad turned to him with a serious face and said, "What then, Bjorn? This is really to my taste." Bjorn said, "Well, it was awful, because as soon as Grettir had found himself a sword and was coming away, the dead king jumped to life and started wrestling with him, trying to break his neck." Starkad leaned forward and took the boy's hand strongly. Go on," he said. "Why have you never told me this before?" Bjorn said, "You never asked me. Well, all I can say is that Grettir sidestepped old King Kar, then cut off his head and laid it beside his thigh in the proper manner to stop the ghost from getting up again." "What of the sword, though?" said Starkad, his pale eyes glaring. "Did it bring him luck?" Bjorn said, "As far as I know it did. He used it on a good few bearsarks to his advantage before we lost track of him." Starkad got up and went roaming along the deck, his hand tugging at his stubbly beard. All the men got out of his way. At last he came back and sat down again by Bjorn. "I am glad you told me this," he said. "Now I am certain that you bring good fortune with you. It was in my mind to go to a swordsmith in Dira one day soon and buy myself a new sword, like any ordinary fellow. But now I see the right thing to do. A man such as I am should not buy a sword, for a bought sword carries no virtue in its edge. The correct thing would be to take one from a burial howe. Then I should be sure that it was an heirloom and carried the old magic in its blade. These new blades have no more magic in them than a hedge knife or a billhook, such as thralls use on the farms." Giles Scallagrim had come up and was listening to this. He said, "You would be wiser to buy yourself a sword, axe friend. Most of the houses are broken open by now, and the best weapons are all gone." Starcad glared at him so hard then that the Jarl said, "Very well, a man must make up his own mind, I see. If you want to do what this lad's kinsman did, then I know a place down the coast, 3 days away, where there is a howe or two. But they lie close to a village where the men are as wild as wolves. That is why they have never been robbed before. Most sea rovers give them a wide berth, for it is a bad bargain to raid such a place and go back to the boat with half the rowers dead." Starcad said, "We will worry about that when the time comes. You point out this place to me, friend, and I will do the rest. Now, tell me as much as you can remember, Bjorn, about how Grettir did this deed."